Welcome back to Horrors Worldwide. Today I'm going to explain an American thriller film called The Night of the Hunter, released in 1955. Spoilers ahead! Watch out and stay safe. The film is set in West Virginia in the 1930s during the Great Depression and follows Reverend Harry Powell. The film starts on a starry scene, with a woman's voice telling young children about a southern tale that talks about the dangers in childhood and how to recognize wolves in sheep's clothing. That's some real foreshadowing right there. Next, we see several children playing hide-and-seek near a farmhouse. One of the children goes to hide in the cellar, but stumbles on something gruesome: the body of a young woman. Then, we see the murderer, Powell, driving away. Through his conversation with the Lord, we find out his mission. He is a misogynistic serial killer who disguises himself as a self-appointed preacher and targets young women by marrying them, stealing their money, and then murdering them using a switchblade knife. Ugh, that's pretty gruesome. To add even more insult to injury, he has convinced himself that he's doing God's work and killing off these young women as they arouse carnal desires in men. Powell's character famously has L.O.V.E tattooed on the fingers of one hand and H.A.T.E on the fingers of the other. At this point, he is arrested for car theft and sentenced for a month's term in Moundsville Penitentiary. Here, Powell ends up in the same cell as the bank robber and murderer, Ben Harper. Harper is a local man who was sentenced to death for the murder of two men while robbing a bank, a successful robbery in which he managed to steal $10,000. With the police catching up to him, Harper hid the stolen money in a doll belonging to his 4-year-old daughter, Pearl, and made her and his 9-year-old son, John, promise to never reveal to anyone where the money is hidden. Powell tries his utmost to get Harper to reveal where the money is, but Harper takes the secret to his grave. After Harper has been executed and Powell released, he travels to Harper's hometown. We see Harper's children, John and Pearl. They are taunted by the other town children who sing a hangman song and draw chalk outlines of hangmen in front of the two. John takes his sister home, and even though he is tempted by a watch in a store window, he stays strong and takes his sister home. That night, John tells his sister a story about a king who was captured and left behind his son and daughter and orders them to defend his gold. As he tells the story, the ominous silhouette of Reverend Powell appears in their bedroom, and he sings, "Leaning on the everlasting love." The next day, John visits his friend, an elderly drunkard living in a riverboat named Birdie Steptoe. I'll bet you've never heard a name so unique in your life. Anyhow, Uncle Birdie had been working on repairing Ben Harper's skiff on the river. Reverend Powell has arrived in the town, and he sets about charming the townsfolk. He goes to Spoon's, an ice cream parlor owned by Walter Spoon and his wife, Icy. This is where Willa, Harper's widow, works, and earlier in the movie she had told him that she had no intentions of remarrying. There he passes himself off as a respectable citizen and introduces himself as the Reverend who was with Ben Harper and offered him spiritual comfort before he died. Willa, despite her vow not to remarry, is won over by Powell's show of evangelical piety. She is convinced that her sins led to her now-dead husband, Ben, doing what he did, and that by marrying a preacher, she will atone for her sins. Powell explains the meaning of the tattoos on his hands, that love and hate have been in an eternal struggle since man fell from heaven, and that love wins out every time. Icy decides that she likes the preacher, and invites him to a picnic. By this time, Powell has won the trust of the town, with the only exception being Harper and Willa's son, John. At the picnic, Icy tries to convince Willa to marry Powell, and she later agrees given his devoted nature. At home, Powell confronts John and tries to get him to reveal the location of the money, but fails. Willa and Powell get married soon after. On the night of the honeymoon, Willa wears a beautiful negligee to seduce Powell, but he rejects her advances and tells her she needs to control her lust. Willa in turn asks him to help keep her clean. The next day we see John and Uncle Birdie fishing on the repaired skiff, and Birdie tells John that he can come to him if he ever needs help. That same night, we see Willa leading a revival meeting and proclaiming that Powell has saved her soul. Powell finds out accidentally that John and Pearl know the location of the stolen money when he overhears John reminding Pearl of the promise they made to their father. Powell lures Pearl to the parlor and gets increasingly violent by threatening her so that she will reveal the location of the money. During this exchange, Willa overhears him through the window and realizes that he only married her to get the money. Later that night, when Powell comes to their room, he confronts her about listening in through the parlor window, but Willa seems unafraid. She says that John knows where the money is, and that the money is still amongst them, tainting them. However, she is convinced that Powell didn't marry her for the money, but rather that God made him marry her for the salvation of her soul. That didn't last long. Powell then murders Willa and throws her body in the river. Rest in peace, Willa. You deserved so much better. John is awakened by the sound of an engine starting. The next morning, Powell goes to the spoon shop and convinces them and the rest of the town that Willa has run away to lead a life of sin, and he alone is left to take care of the children. He claims that she was a drunkard and that she rejected him on the night of their wedding, and that he has only stayed because of the children. Powell goes back to the house and threatens John and Pearl, terrifying them so that they hide in the cellar. They get a reprieve when Icy arrives with dinner, but afterwards, Powell says they can't have dinner until they reveal the location of the money. John says the money is under a stone in the basement, but when Powell takes the children there, it turns out the floor is made of concrete. Enraged, he threatens to slit John's throat. Terrified, Pearl reveals the location of the stolen money. However, John manages to knock over a shelf of preserves onto Powell, allowing them to escape. They lock him in the cellar and run to try and find shelter with Uncle Birdie. However, when John and Pearl reach the riverboat, they see that Birdie is passed out due to drinking because he discovered Willa's corpse and was terrified that the townspeople would blame him for her death. This was revealed in an earlier scene when Willa's body was shown in a car underwater, and then a fishhook descended and started tugging on the corpse. Powell appears again, and the children have no choice but to run again using their father's boat. The children went begging for help from door to door, but they are turned away until they find shelter in a barn. Powell reappears here, and they run back to the boat, where they are found by Rachel Cooper. Rachel is a tough old woman who looks after orphan children. Powell manages to find them and appears at Rachel's house, but she is not deceived by his charm and suspects something is wrong. She chases Powell off with a shotgun, but he threatens her that he will be back at night. All night, Rachel and Powell have a standoff, symbolized by a duet sung between the two, but by dawn, Rachel injures Powell after he gets into her house. She locks him up in her barn and calls the police, who, by now, have discovered Willa's body and realized who the murderer is. John is traumatized by Powell's arrest, as it seems to him a parallel to his father's arrest. He beats Powell with the doll containing the money, causing it to break and the money to spill out. John is called as a witness to Moundsville Penitentiary, where Powell is sentenced. Rachel adopts John and Pearl along with her other children. Icy Spoon leads an enraged mob to the police station with the intention of lynching Powell. The police manage to get Powell to safety, but the professional executor there promises Powell that he'll be seeing him again really soon. The movie ends on a more positive note, with John and Pearl celebrating their first Christmas as part of their adopted family with Rachel and the other children.